we are joined by the National Spokesperson for Law and Order, Mark Mitchell. Welcome to the show. Good afternoon to you, Mark.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
You've just heard what I said in my introduction to that.
Yeah.
That's not an answer at all, really, is it, from either the police or corrections?
I just don't think it passes the common sense test. I think that most Kiwis know and are pretty clear about what they're feeling out there, and the reality is a lot of Kiwis feel less safe than what they did 6 years ago, and it's because we had a Labour government that came in and prioritised reducing the prison muster by 30% and repealing our only tough piece of sentencing legislation. And what that has led to is very clear signals to the judiciary, and we have seen an increase of people out on home detention and electronic bail, an increase of about 158%, and you've had a 90% increase of people absconding. And some of the worst firearms violence that we've seen in our community in the last couple of months have been people on home detention.
Yes, and Ram Raiders in particular. Listen, Mark, in addition to that, New Zealand Herald has also published, so this is obviously they've got a really good leak here. Yeah. They ran the story yesterday that simply tinfoil is stopping detection of the fact that they have absconded. But today they have run another story, which I'm sure you'll be aware of, that nearly 50 people who are on actually the bail, electronic monitoring bail, are actually on bail for homicide and related offences, alongside 70 accused of kidnapping and abduction.
Look, so we've had anecdotal information to tell us that this has been ongoing, and we've confronted the government and the police minister about it, who have denied it and said that it's for minor offences, traffic infringement notices, and cannabis type offences. So that's obviously not true. And look, I just come back to the point that you don't have to be a brain surgeon, and all of us can see that there's people out on electronic bail and home detention that shouldn't be. They should be in prison. Public safety has been forgotten, and this government has sent very perverse signals to the judiciary and our justice system. They don't want people in jail. They want them out in the community, and the community now is suffering because of that.
Why the policy to be so kind to criminals? Could you explain I know that you're not in support of it, but sitting on the other side of the house as these policies came through, what was the rationale that was advanced as to why these people should be electronically monitored rather than in prison?
I just think the government's got horribly confused. I think that if you went to their Justice Summit that they held when they first came into government, they forgot to invite victim advocacy groups, and I heard government ministers standing up, Kelvin Davis for one, saying that recognising that the victims in our criminal justice system are often the gang members, and so I think they've got horribly confused with social investment and trying to get into people's lives earlier and keeping them out of our criminal justice system, and the fact that these people are out there hurting, they're committing violent offences, they're creating more victims, and there has to be a punitive approach taken to that. There has to be consequences, and they have completely given up on any sort of consequences and punitive approach, and it's created this situation now where we've got some of the worst violent crime and lawlessness that we've ever experienced as a country.
Another part of this also, and I'm thinking because all these, they don't exist in a vacuum, a policy like this, a belief that somehow culturally, perhaps, and maybe just looking at the ethnicity of offenders and things like that, that there is a view that the justice system, which has been broadcast on a relatively frequent basis, Mark, is racist. Yep. So therefore, we need to be much more sensitive in handling criminals because they are victims themselves of a racist justice system.
Look, I'm going to speak. I have the police portfolio, Michael, so I'm going to speak to that. I will stand every day and debate anyone that tries to paint our police service in New Zealand as racist. They serve without fear or favour. And what our police have to do is they have to deal with the social problems that we throw up as a country. They don't get to choose or say who's committing the offending. So if we are going off, if we're looking into our criminal justice system saying that there's an overrepresentation, for example, of Maori, which is about over 50%, or Pacific Islander, which is at about 30, or less than that actually. I think it's in the teens, and then Caucasian or Pākehā about 30. Then that's fine for actually capturing the stats. But what you need to do, instead of pointing your finger and blaming the police or the justice system, you need to go back into those people's lives and figure out, why is there an overrepresentation, and what investment do we need to make as a government to try and get those people onto a much better pathway instead of coming into our criminal justice system. And that's the social investment model. That's the way that you're going to fix it, not pointing the finger and blaming the justice system or our police for it. It's actually going back into communities, iwi leaders, communities, local government, central government, working together to identify what those intergenerational ingrained social issues are, and then making an investment much earlier on in people's lives and keeping them out of the criminal justice system. I don't think it's a helpful debate at all to point the finger at any one sector, and certainly I don't think it's helpful at all to start blaming the police and pointing the finger at the police. They quite simply will deal with whatever our country throws up at them and what the social issue sort of throws at them.
Mark, I got elected to Parliament in 1990, 33 years ago. Probably, the response you've just given them would have pretty much been the response of all police spokespeople in the major parties of the time.
Yep.
We know what causes these problems, don't we? I mean, over the last 33 years, crime's got out of control. We've lost confidence and faith in our justice system, but also in our police too, I might add, over those last 33 years. The reason that law and order is so high on people's pecking order is because we're scared, and we don't believe that anybody's coming to help us. So initially there's a detection and apprehension issue, which we've just talked about now.
Yeah.
But also, we know what causes crime. We've known for this. We had a Royal Commission on Social Policy 40 years ago. Why? What's the problem?
Because we haven't got leaders that are brave enough to stand up and put a line in the sand in our communities, whether it be community groups, local government, iwi and central government. We actually all have to get together, work together, commit to one another, and be brave enough to stand up and say, we're putting a line in the sand and we're not putting up with this anymore. We're a small country with a relatively small population. We have one national police service. We don't share borders. We're a coastal nation. We should be the safest country in the world. And at the moment, we're heading in the wrong direction. And so it's time for us as a country actually to stand up and say we're going to start to deal with those difficult intergenerational issues and social issues. We're going to use data and the best information that we have, so that we know we can direct the investment that we need to make as a country and start to make those fundamental changes that are really hard and crunchy, and they are intergenerational and they'll take decades, but that is the real way that we will start to reduce the amount of people coming into our criminal justice system and start to really deal with those deep social issues that we have had in our country for a while. In terms of policing, Michael, we got to get back to some hard and tough policing. We've got to put a line in the sand, like I said, and let the gangs know that they're not running the town, that our police are. And to do that, we've got to back our police, we've got to untie their hands, they have to have some strong leadership that's got their backs, and allow them to go out and do the job that they want to do.
I have very little doubt that in 8 weeks' time, when the election is, you will be appointed to the role of Minister of Police by the new Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon. Now that is what all the polls suggest, and unless I can't see that changing in the next 6 or 7 or 8 weeks.
Well, look, thank you for that. Thank you for the vote of confidence. I do appreciate that.
Well,
look, at the end of the day,
listen, I know you're going to be. So, I mean, it's not, because you don't have to be a betting man to work out that governments lose election and this one's lost it. But the thing that I'm intrigued is when you are the Minister of Police and you just talked about leadership, about whether or not you're actually going to reform the police itself. It seems to me, and I know I'm exhibiting a frustration that I meet in every day from people from so many different walks of life, irrespective of their political background, that the police are not protecting us anymore, that they're not there when we want them to be, that they're not visible, and that and that if it's something minor like stealing $200 worth of groceries from New World or having our car broken into, we know the police are not going to be interested and not going to come. When's that? Is that going to change, Mark?
Well, no. So, look, I hear what you're saying because I've done well over 30 public meetings around the country, and one of the common themes is there's a frustration amongst communities that when they put their hand up for help, often the police can't respond. That's quite simply that's a symptomatic of the fact that they're dealing with, you know, a 42% increase in violent crime and a over 500% increase in ram raids and aggravated robberies. A 60% increase in mental health call-outs, which, by the way, they're not the right agencies to be dealing with that. So they've been completely overwhelmed on the demand side of it, and it's frustrating for them because it means that they can't respond to those calls for help when they want to. Most police officers join the police because they want to protect and serve their communities. So unfortunately, that's the situation that we find ourselves in. In terms of the policing style, for whatever reason, I don't know why, there seems to be this belief that having our police officers out on beat, highly visible, developing relationships with shopkeepers and retailers, understanding what's happening in their patch, having some ownership of it, and giving people a sense of security just by being visible. For some reason, the present leadership think that that's retrograde, but we actually need to get back to that. We need to be having our police highly visible on the streets. It gives the public a sense of confidence. It's a great deterrent, and it allows them to build relationships, for example, with our shopkeepers and retailers who have been hit very hard and are currently suffering. I'm in Palmerston North today, and I've met with 3 shopkeepers already this morning. All 3 of them have asked and said, please, can we see police back out on the street? They don't feel safe. 2 of them are women, and they just do not feel safe on the street. So, and the police want to do that, but they are literally trying to cope with a tsunami of offending that's coming at them, and they just don't have the resources. So I think that there has to be a return to some good old-fashioned policing, back to basics, highly visible, and supporting our frontline police officers with a zero-tolerance approach to gangs and their violence and intimidation that they sort of try to put on display almost on a weekly basis now. And I think that will have a positive flow-on effect too in terms of dealing with a lot of this youth and juvenile offending who, of course, have aspirations to join the adult gangs.
Ginny Anderson, your counterpart, says that they've increased the number of sworn police the number of police personnel by 1,800. I know that there is some sort of debate whether or not they're sworn or unsworn or whether they're things, but nevertheless, they have increased the number of police by a significant amount in their 6 years. It's not enough though, is it? I mean, don't we need actually more sworn personnel, more people out there?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. So good thing that you have an increase in police numbers, but the reality of it is any benefit that might have been felt on the front lines in terms of reinforcement has been lost because the demand side has grown and well exceeded any benefits that we might have got of the additional 1,800. So effectively, our frontline police officers are still treading water, just trying to keep their head above water effectively. They took too long to deliver them. And the demand side has just grown so much that neither the public nor our frontline police are feeling any benefit of that increase in numbers. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. Then there's the justice system. So that's the other part of this equation. You've apprehended somebody. We've just looking at the number of people who are on bail at the moment and who are clearly still dangerous and violent, and all those who have been through the courts themselves.
Yep.
That surely has to require reform as well too, doesn't it? Because we not only want these people out of creating danger, but we also want the justice system to work a wee bit quicker so that we haven't got people sitting on bail for a year waiting for a trial or 18 months.
Yeah, so the court system is broken without a doubt. That's it doesn't matter where you look inside our justice system at the moment, it's overwhelmed. And there's lots of things that there's several things that we've got to get fixed and quickly to try and get the justice system working much better for the general public. I think in terms of sentencing and consequences, we've made one announcement already that we would cap the amount of discounts at 40% that a judge can apply at sentencing, because we've seen sentences that might start at 6 years, they get discounted down, all of a sudden they're at 2, and then the person's eligible for home detention. So we want to tighten up on that. We said that we'd look at the Sentencing Act as well as lawmakers to send a very clear signal and put new rules in place for the judiciary in terms of making sure that the seriousness of the offending, that the actual consequences match that much better. and of course just a big focus on getting public safety back into the heart of our criminal justice system, and I think that's been missing for 6 years.
Yeah. You've got to have a lot of work on your hands, but you're also going to need additional resources, Mark. You're clearly going to need more money. Or is the argument that actually the police in particular have enough money, they're just misappropriating it?
No, I think that it's true that we're going to have to make investment into public safety. It's not going to be easy, because I think the books are in much worse shape. The government books are in much worse shape than what they're even making out, and we are going to have to be fiscally responsible coming into government. However, everyone's saying that, I think that there's a clear understanding within certainly with our leader, Chris Luxon, and our caucus, that we're going to have to invest to make sure that we return our country and we get our country back on the right track in terms of public safety, and back heading towards being the safest country in the world rather than in the complete opposite direction. So we know there's going to have to be investment there. We are going to have different priorities, without a doubt, to the current government, and our expectation is that the police leadership respond to those and respond to them quickly.
And personally, you're standing for, you're currently a constituency MP for
Final Parole, which is north of Auckland. It's the Hibiscus Coast, Coatesville, Dairy Flat, Paremurima, and part of Albany Heights.
Okay, so you've got good South African expat population there too, I guess.
Yeah, no, there's plenty of South Africans in my electorate, without a doubt.
And they'd be giving you jip at the moment, wouldn't they, eh?
Yeah, well, listen, they are heavily invested. A lot of them immigrated to New Zealand 20 plus years ago. They're now proud Kiwis, yet they might be a bit torn when the All Blacks
are
playing
that's all right.
the Springboks,
yeah.
But the reality is they're proud Kiwis, and if I hold public meetings and there's South Africans there that have immigrated, they'll come up to me afterwards and they'll say, if we don't turn this around, the ram raids, the carjackings, the gun violence that we're currently seeing in New Zealand, we saw this in South Africa.
Yes.
And that's what we came to New Zealand to get away from.
Yes.
And if you can't get on top of it, we're scared that it's going to become normalised. And I think that's a very clear warning for us. And I think that most of the country, we feel that, and we know that we have to turn it around.
Good point, well made. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck.
Thanks, Michael.
We'll catch up with you later on the campaign trail. That's Mark Mitchell, who is the National MP for Whangaparaoa. He must be one of the few seats they won at the last election, actually. They won, how many constituency seats did they win? 12? 15? Out of 65? I know.